We are starting to get to a spot in our preparation where the big bike decisions for Leadville have probably been made. You know, what bike you'll be on, first of all, what wheels, what components. You're settling into that setup, getting to know it, making sure it's going to do what you want it to do on race day.
Of course, there's still a few important decisions you're going to make between early July and race day, like tires, maybe, your type of sealant, what kind of grips, but you're absolutely right, Hottie. The big decisions have probably been made by now.
Yeah, your bike now just needs some finishing touches, hopefully, like fresh brake pads, and my favorite bike product, the sometimes forgotten, always hard-working chain. And we hope you will run a Shimano XTR chain. They really have proven to be the most efficient chains on the market, and that's not just us saying so. That's the likes of Zero Friction Cycling and Friction Facts. They say so too.
You are going to like a nice item I have just added to my bike, Hottie. I will just tell you, XTR and wax. What do you think?
I love that.
One of our guests this episode, Josh Portner, CEO of Silka and a real-life expert on drivetrain efficiency, also recommends Shimano Dura-Ace XTR. Obviously, if you have Shimano shifting, you probably already know this, and you will be going with a Shimano chain.
So please freshen up that chain like Fatty did for race day. You can check out the XTR chain at bike.shimano.com. And thanks to Shimano for being the title sponsor of this show.
3, 2, 1.
Leadville, the podcast for the 100-mile mountain bike race presented by Shimano. It is season 6, episode 21 of the show that breaks down, builds up, gets you ready, and freaks you out for the highest, hardest one-day mountain bike race in the country. I am Michael Houghton, hottie to most.
And I'm Fatty. There is a spot between the base of Powerline and the pipeline aid station where you are going to wish you were as slick as a world-class time trialist, where Leadville goes from being this grinding, climbing bike race to something that feels like a race of truth.
And that's not the only spot on the Leadville course where you will want to cheat to win. In this show, we're going to tell you how to get low and pedal fast, how to save a few precious seconds, make that minutes. We have 2 guests on the show to help us find those minutes. Our friend and marginal gainer, Silka CEO Josh Portner, and a guest we have relied on a bunch this season for advice on altitude and pacing, pro mountain biker Dylan Johnson.
What is a good strategy for staying ahead of the cutoff times?
What do the experts say about sleeping effectively at altitude, and what do you each do?
For Leadville, hardtail or full suspension?
Yeah, good question.
Leadville Frequently Asked Questions, LFAQs, our knowledge sharing segment that makes Fatty and I sound really smart when in reality...
In reality? Is there... What, are we not smart about this? I heard that ellipsis.
Hey, Rebecca Ryan Davis on the Facebook page has asked a training plan question. She wants to know the benefits of completing a 100-mile ride during the last build portion. She said she did this with her Ironman training, but it's not on the books for this plan, for the Leadville plan. Not sure if I should alter it or if it's just a mental game. Fatty, your prep has you going in the opposite direction this year, but I know you've heard this one before, and maybe you've tried the Leadville simulation ride as part of your training?
I have. That is a different kind of question, actually. Riding your trainer for a Leadville length, ugh. That was no fun. But I 100% agree, actually, that a 100-mile ride is a mental game no matter what. I would disagree that it is just a mental game. This race is mental, right? And knowing how and whether you are able to do a 100-mile ride is incredibly important. You're going to see that you have the endurance. You find out whether you've got your nutrition plan nailed. Make sure you've got the power, the lungs, you've got the clothing figured out. Basically, this is your shakedown. So having everything in place to do the Leadville 100 and testing it out on a long ride, a couple of weeks before the race, great idea. But I would not do 100 miles on my mountain bike this close to the race. I would do it on my road bike, preferably, where it's not going to beat you up as much and it's not going to take as long. Or maybe do 65 miles, mostly on road on your mountain bike. You'll get a plenty big workout. You're going to get confidence in your training and your equipment and your clothing and your food without getting the enduring exhaustion that could bleed over into race day. So my answer is go big, but not so big that you are overcooked for race day.
Yeah, you just got to remember how hard a 100-mile mountain bike race is and how long it can take to recover. For instance, Leadville can take me more than a week to recover from. But I get it. Leadville racers, especially first-timers, want to be assured they can make the distance. And that's why there's an urge to do a 100-miler in training. Here's what I would suggest. Do a long ride or two, just not 100 miles. Do a couple that you can recover from in a couple days so you can continue to train with intention. And during those 1 or 2 longer rides, ride them like a race. Eat like you plan to eat, pace like you plan to pace, and do this in particular. Make your stops short. Only stop to fill bottles and or hydration packs and then get going again. No coffee stops in the middle of these training rides. Act like you're going to act on race day, including those stops. I did a series of these rides like that in my run-up to Big Buckling and found them to be great. And I know none of us is Dave Weens, but the 6-time champ often said his longest rides were 5.5 hours, and he only did a couple. Training is cumulative, it's quality, not a single ride. Do the work, trust it as you go to the line.
Yeah, Hadi, that is for sure what I'm going to be doing this year. I'm going to trust the work that I've done, while not Leadvillian in length, will be the work I need to do to get me back home to 6th and Harrison. And remember, Rebecca, make those final prep rides an eating and drinking rehearsal. That is crucial. Lay out your food, your hydration, all of that the night before, and execute like you plan to on Leadville race day. And to stock up for that trial run, be sure to go to the feed for those essentials.
Like with your bike, hopefully by now you have the big things figured out when it comes to calories and nutrition, how many carbs per hour, how much fluid, and what you're going to use to meet your goals. Never second gels and drink, scratch hydration and super fuel and chews, or goo gels and drink mix. Whatever your poison, have enough to execute your ride, then double or triple the order so you can do another and another if need be.
I like all of that except for the word poison. I mean, no poison. Avoid the poison. You can find all of those brands and more at the feed. And Hadi, since you mentioned recovering from those prep rides, which is crucial, Rebecca and others in her position should grab some recovery mix so they can bounce back properly and get ready for the next workout. Again, the feed has plenty of great options when it comes to recovery drink mixes.
Claim your $80 annual credit at thefeed.com/Leadville. Register your email and verify your phone number, then spend your first feed credit of $20 right away.
Again, we've been talking about taking care of some of those final equipment decisions for your upcoming race. The big choices are probably done when it comes to something like wheels. We hope you've already settled on the NVM5s and have put in some good miles on them.
Is it too late to make a wheel set purchase? No. We're just figuring by now you've made that choice. But there's still a reason to check in with the NV website to make sure you've got those little extras you might need. Spare valve stems and cores, rim tape, valve core remover, maybe some bar tape if you plan to pad the intersection of your bars.
I have a lot of the things that you just mentioned, Hadi, but I still love just browsing the NV website to make sure. I will tell you, I send Hadi to Twin Lakes Alternate every year with all manner of backup parts, and much of it concerns my wheels. I've never had a problem with my NV wheels during the Leadville 100, but it is nice to have peace of mind.
Don't wait for a leaky valve stem to buy one. Have a backup on hand. Same goes for rim tape. You can find all that stuff at enve.com. That's ENVE.com.
When Hadi and I discussed the topic for this episode, frankly, we were a little bit on the fence whether we should do this one. Just mentioning the word aerodynamics and Leadville can cause some people's eyes to roll. And we get that. There are more things that should come first before we start thinking about our ability to cheat the wind. But since we've done such a great job about talking about those other things, we thought, what the heck? And look, I know there have been times on the Leadville course, honestly, every year, where I have been riding with my head down, the wind in my face, or at 3/4, and just wondering if that segment would ever end. If you're racing Leadville to have fun, and you're confident you're going to make the cutoffs and time goal, I don't know, maybe this discussion isn't for you.
But if you are on the margins, you're fast and you're trying to be faster, you think you can big buckle, but you want to make sure you're close to the cutoff times, but would love some free seconds or minutes, then this could be something you could use. Just remember, as we delve into this topic, being more aero, this advice is not intended to replace all the other things you need to do to have a successful day at Leadville. The watts per kilogram, the nutrition and hydration, the proper bike setup, the descending skills, all that stuff is more important and should be prioritized over what we're about to tell you. But for this episode, just think about that descent out of town, the trip around Turco's Lake, the pedaling between the bottom of Powerline and Columbine. All those sections where cheating the wind can pay you back in minutes. We'll kick things off with our friend and someone Fatty and I spent a lot of time talking with on our other podcast, Marginal Gains. Josh Portner is the CEO of Silka. He was the technical director at Zip Wheels. He also consults professional teams on going faster, in part by taking them to the wind tunnel. And recently, he did some wind tunnel time to figure out if aero matters at slower speeds in off-road racing. All right, we're back with Josh Portner from Silka, CEO of Silka, and consultant to the stars, consultant to the pro peloton and to racers all over the world, and to the rest of us now, Josh. I think we're learning more and more, especially when it comes to aerodynamics, that aerodynamics matter even at slower speeds. But to backtrack a little bit, Josh, I mean, I think a lot of people think, aerodynamics, that's a time trial thing, right? That's a thing for guys with aero bars and skin suits on and getting real low and riding on the Tour de France. Tell us, though, when do aerodynamics matter? And maybe dispel that myth a little bit for us.
The best way to think of it, clearly, there's this, and it's been around as long as I've been around, right, that aero doesn't matter below X speed, and everybody's got a number, below 16, below 18. It doesn't matter. And technically, it matters everywhere, but because the drag increases at the square of your velocity, essentially, and then your power to overcome the drag is increasing at the cube of velocity. And so, that's why it's easy to double your speed from 5 to 10 and harder to go from 10 to 20 and much above 20, every little bit is hurting. And so it matters everywhere. Obviously, it matters more at higher speeds. But the challenge, I think, for a lot of people in thinking about this is it's not necessarily about your ground speed, right? The speed you're rolling across the earth. It's really about the wind speed. You need to think almost like an airplane. And so, for years we've had people say, you test in the wind tunnel at 40 kilometers an hour, 50 kilometers an hour. I never ride that fast. But you may not ride 50 kilometers an hour, but you probably will ride 25 kilometers an hour into a 20 or 25 kilometer an hour headwind. And from an aerodynamic point of view, that's 50 kilometer an hour wind speed or airspeed. And in those moments, these drag saving things can be, just massively massive. We did a tunnel test here lately with Dylan Johnson, and we were doing some modeling around Unbound. And there was a section of the course, and I want to say it was like a 10-mile section, 12-mile section, something like that, that consistently has this strong headwind. And putting in, his speed and that headwind, I think we were getting like a 45 kilometer an hour average airspeed. And, when we looked at going to like an aero bar position or a puppy paws position versus the hoods, the difference there was like 8 or 9 minutes to ride that 12-mile section. That's massive, right? So even if it matters very little for the rest of the ride, say you've got mostly tailwind or crosswind or cross headwind, you can think of it still strategically as an area that you can really find performance when it really counts. And so, one of the things we teach, and we teach this in the World Tour as well, those hard headwind situations like get down, get aero, get low. And then that is not the time to be, eating or futzing with other things. And because of that, then you plan that into your race strategy, right? I'm not saying don't eat if you're hungry or don't drink if you're thirsty, but, if you know that you're going to, take a turn onto this 12-mile section that's going to take you, 50 minutes or 55 minutes to get through, you want to be as aero as possible for as long as possible through that section. And so, that's a way that it can play into race strategy quite a bit as well. Like if oh, hey, I get through this, then I take this turn and I'm going to have a tailwind for 5 miles. Well, in the tailwind, your ground speed's going to be higher. Your airspeed is much lower. Aero plays percentage-wise a much less important piece. And now you can do all the eating and drinking in the world, during that phase of the race. And so that's another reason that it can really pay to, and we do this with all the key World Tour races, but it can really pay to kind of throw a map of your event down and throw the wind overlay over top of it, and then just get yourself sort of a mental picture of, okay, here's my headwind sections, here's my tailwind sections, and then how do I want to strategize things like nutrition or even race tactics around that.
Mm-hmm. Or when you want to maybe focus on getting low and staying low and doing those type of things, right? Like look for those segments where you can take advantage. And how length, I mean, obviously if the segment is 100 meters, it's probably not worth thinking about. But at what point, at what length should you start going, yeah, that's probably a spot where I want to start thinking about how my body is positioned and where I'm sitting in the wind and those types of things?
It really all adds up. So I would tend to say always, if you're sensitive to wind, you have an idea of where it's coming from, and then you're paying attention to it while you're racing. If you're in a strong headwind or strong even head crosswind situation, you should be thinking about it all the time. And, I really think this is one of those areas that, a lot of these like European pros that are now coming over to gravel and things, they have such a natural sense of wind kind of beaten into them. You're kind of never not thinking about the wind. And I think particularly as like, the older guys who've had longer careers, they've all been, stuck in the wrong place when, the peloton went into echelons and just shattered the whole thing. And, you're in the fourth echelon. You're like, well, I'm never getting out of here. This is my lot in life for the next 4 hours. And so I think, those folks tend to have it really beaten into their brains to be constantly thinking about the wind. And I think, it's an easy skill to learn. And you can generally see it in your power meter if you're riding with power. But yeah, I would always be thinking about it, because even if you're with a group, and you're in a headwind, you want to be as aero as possible. When you're in the wind, you want to be drafting as much as possible when you're able to be in the pack. And as that starts to move into crosswinds, if you're going to be on a wheel, and there's a little like cross headwind, well, you should only ever always be on the one side of that wheel to take advantage of that cross headwind, right? It's small changes in the way that I think you think about things can add up to big differences. Because, if you're in a group that you want to stay with, the speed is essentially fixed by the group that you're in. But by making some of these changes, you can dramatically change your calorie burn rate to maintain the speed that you're maintaining. And some of these things, and we certainly see it with some of the Unbound stuff that we've done, and at the World Tour, like Tour de France type speeds, little subtle things, can be, 30, 40 watt changes in power. And that, if the difference between 200 and 230 for a World Tour pro is no big deal, physiologically, they're not under stress. But from a caloric perspective, over time, that adds up into something that's real. If you can burn 30 fewer calories or 30 fewer watts for a couple of hours, there's some real calorie savings in there, right? So, and then, we pull Alan Lim or somebody in to talk about like the physiology of the other stuff that's going on there. That's not my specialty, but what I do know is that if I could burn 30 fewer calories for 2 hours, I'm going to do it, especially if it's free and all I have to do is be attentive.
Well, let's talk about, you guys were, like you said, in the wind tunnel this past spring, looking at specifically hydration packs and how they perform on the back of an athlete. Now, this was a drop bar scenario, but you'll see a lot of hydration packs, obviously many hydration packs in the Leadville Trail 100. So there's probably some crossover here. Tell us what you guys found out about wearing a hydration pack and trying to make it not only not hurt you, but help you as you're riding along.
Yeah, we were surprised. I could see going into it and had years ago had actually been kind of at the forefront of sort of, you remember, like the Bobby Julich era of trying to put the hydration pack like under the skin suit, and then we try to put it on the belly under the skin suit, and it always worked. It was always faster. But I really thought, some of these modern packs, they've got a lot of sticky outy bits, as we would say in the car racing world. There's just a lot of stuff. There's straps and tubes, and just a lot of sticky outy. And I really thought, okay, any form drag improvement to like the rider's body is going to be offset by just the dirtiness of all this other stuff, But what we found consistently, and we've only used a couple of, I would say, the better designed packs on the market. The ones, I think the one was that USWE, USWE, however you say that brand. The one that ended up being the better of the ones we were looking at was that particular brand and a model that's kind of meant to be a slimmer, sleeker, lighter version. But yeah, even with all the sticky outy bits on the front, the clear improvement to the form drag, smoothing that air over the back, was worth, depending on the airspeed, somewhere in the like 1 to 3, 1 to 4 watt range for Dylan. And it repeated. It repeated in the hoods. It repeated in the drops. It repeated when he did aero bar. So we really looked at it as a potential, significant savings over time or over the duration of the race. And I can't remember offhand the total number, but, I think we were somewhere in the 15 minutes over the length of an unbound using the simple, our simple model for wearing the pack. And, that's not going to take you from mid-pack to winning unbound, but it's 15 minutes. I mean, if nothing else, it's, it might just be 15 fewer minutes of suffering. And then I think when you add to that like, oh, hey, it's also got extra water in it. That's not a bad trade-off that you can, be carrying extra fluids and pick up a little aero gain at the same time. So yeah, I think I know Dylan's been singing the praises of that. And I mean, looking around, I don't think I'm seeing anybody at the pointy end of the peloton right now that's not wearing either that pack or a very similar pack.
Right. And our co-host here, Eldon Fatty Nelson, wears a USWE pack too. And now Fatty, not only is it helping you hydrate, but it might be giving you a little advantage. Now, I think what Fatty would need to do is probably get down and make sure that his helmet is close enough to the pack to get full gains. But there you go, Fatty. Some free watts courtesy of Silka and the wind tunnel testing.
Josh, are those gains offset when you stand, though? If you're a standing climber and you've got a pack on, every time you stand, sit down, of course, you've got the extra weight of the water that you're lifting and putting down, right?
I don't have a great answer for you. I'd say, how much are you really standing? From a percentage-wise, is it the aero thing's going to help you 100% of the time you're wearing it, even if there was some offsetting factor, but you're only standing 2% of your time out on course? Clearly that's not going to offset it. For me, I look at the potential downsides here as being much more on the sort of mental, emotional, and potentially like placebo side of the coin, where like personally, I hate wearing a backpack. I just hate it. And I don't like that stuff on my back. I don't, everything about it. I don't like having that sweaty patch. I think for me personally, it probably would not be worth the marginal gain to spend, my 20 hours it would take me to finish Unbound with the fitness I have, thinking about how miserable I was wearing this stupid thing on my back. So, for me personally, I wouldn't do it. But I think, if you're a fast contender at that event and you don't mind the thing, or you've trained yourself to not mind the thing, right, which is another option. We are mentally and emotionally flexible, right? So with enough work in the right way, you'd get used to it. And so I think, if I were in Dylan's shoes, yeah, I would get comfortable with the pack and use it. But yeah, that would be an interesting question. And I can't say we've ever studied, I've just never had a need to study something like standard climbing with backpack, no backpack, but that's actually would be kind of a fun one to take a look at.
Yeah, and the other drawdown of a hydration pack is it puts weight up high, and on a mountain bike, although mountain bikers are very used to riding with hydration packs, that can be an issue if you're trying to handle the bike, because high weight means, you're tossing more. This kind of the weight has more leverage over what you're doing than you'd otherwise like to have. Let's talk quickly too about aero bars. Josh, look, the Lifetime has now banned aero bars at the Leadville Trail 100 for all riders. So what else can we do if we're on flat bars to try and find a little that keeps us safe too? Can you think of anything off the top of your mind?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest one for me would be just running narrower bars. I am not of the mountain bike world, but the one trend that I noticed, and I remember this from my time at SRAM years ago, is when I was riding mountain bikes 30 years ago, we all had our trail, and we knew the narrowest 2 trees on the trail, and you would cut your bars like an inch shorter than that, and then you'd put like some Control Tech extensions on there to like protect your hands. And I go to a mountain bike race today, and I think like the average mountain bike handlebar is like 7 feet wide. I don't know when it got so wide, but I mean, it's like those Harley Davidson chopper things, right? That just strikes me as like, and again, that's not my world. So maybe there's a huge benefit to it, but gosh, I mean, I think, back in the day we were doing some pretty serious stuff, and we were doing it on like road width flat bars. That's the kind of thing you look in the tunnel. I mean, just taking your hands from, 20 centimeters wider than your shoulders and just getting them in line with your shoulders from an aerodynamic perspective is massive. It's just massive. You're essentially reducing your frontal area, right, by kind of getting your arms in front of your body. But you're also just doing so much more to control the flow and to some extent control the flow that's kind of dumping into your chest, which, for all intents and purposes, is a little bit like a parachute. The other thing, and I can't remember what they're called, but there's those little like toggle looking things that you can put on your bar.
Togs.
Togs. Okay.
Yeah, togs.
Those things are clever. And I mean, putting your hands in that spot, if you put them narrow, that's going to be a big difference, guaranteed for anybody. There aren't a whole lot of things in aero where you can be like 100% that's going to work, but that is one of those. You go from a 60 centimeter wide hand position to a 30 centimeter wide hand position, like you're probably going to reduce the drag of the system by 15%. I mean, it's going to be a big number.
I think you just sold a bunch of togs.
It's probably a good addition. Yeah. Yeah, no, they're clever. And I think, it's one of those, I remember the first time I saw them thinking, well, that's a little silly. And then and then thinking about it, go, oh, well, actually if I'm on my mountain bike and I'm in a flat or a road section, that's exactly how I always just squish my hands together either side of the stem and kind of ride in that almost like track racer position with low elbows. And then those little things just give you sort of a hook so you're not slipping off the front of the bike. I think they're quite clever.
Yeah, we had the founder Togs on the show earlier in the season. We talked about using them for alternate hand positions to relieve hand pain, but aerodynamics didn't come up with that conversation, and now it has. So a good one there. Thank you for that, Josh. And then, of course, Josh, we have these other ways to help us kind of cheat the win. You have socks, jerseys, correct? Picking helmets. Those all can kind of add up, even at low speed. Should we be paying attention to the stuff like there's, for the racer coming in at 10, 11 hours, I mean, their average speeds over the course of the day is about 10 miles per hour. Now, they have sections where they're 20, 25 miles per hour. Are all these other little things worth our attention?
I would say so. Again, I think the best example of that is that like pure headwind stretch, right? I mean, think of if I can save you 10 minutes in a 12-mile stretch of headwind, that's not nothing, right? I mean, if even just the the mental, back to our mental emotional piece, the emotional benefit of knowing that, hey, I'm going to get through this section 10 minutes faster. That feels huge. And then the whole rest of the time, this stuff isn't hurting you, right? I mean, there's no penalty to it. And so, yeah, certainly things like, okay, well, you're going to wear socks, so you might as well wear aero socks, right? There's no down, there's no thing out on course where it's like, oh, he's got aero socks, that's a penalty. It's like, no, you need socks, get the aero ones. With your with the clothing, I think it can be as simple as just getting the clothing really fit properly, tight. And we talk about that, how, World Tour athletes have tailors and they customize the clothing and all that stuff. But in its simplest form, you need to wear clothing and you're going to buy clothing anyway. So just buy clothing that fits. And by fits, it needs to be tight. You can certainly go past that and say, buy a race suit or buy a skin suit. And, again, at the very pointy end of the peloton, we're pushing everybody into skin suits because it makes a huge difference. And if you're not, I tell everybody, if you're not willing or able to wear a skin suit, then I might look at one of those, I think Castelli calls it like the speed suit or whatever. It's sort of like it's like a one-piece jersey, one-piece bib short with a jersey, but the jersey's like sewn into the shorts. I think all the companies make them, but it's a good hybrid. It looks like a jersey and shorts. I think it's got some pockets in the back, but it's like 80% a skin suit. So I would, if you're not going to skin suit, I would look at a speed suit like that. And then beyond that, if neither of those are an option for you, I would just make sure that whatever clothing I am wearing fits very, very tightly.
The great news is I look fantastic in a skin suit.
You do. And we push race day jerseys on the show all the time. Our sponsor, DNA, they have a race day jersey. It's a nice cut. It's a tight cut. And Fatty and I spend a lot of time saying, get in that tight jersey. I know maybe it's not the most loosey-goosey mountain biking thing in the world, but hell, it's going to save you a little bit of time over the course of a day. So, Josh, I want to wrap up by this. Say I handed you an entry to the Leadville Trail 100 and miraculously you accepted, and you're looking at just trying to get back in under 12 hours so you get your buckle. What are some of the things that Josh Portner is going to do? And it may be repetitive here. You may repeat some of the same things, but then what are some of the things you're going to reach for to give you an advantage out there over the course of the day? Now, reminded, you're going to climb 12,000 feet. It's going to be a lot of climbing, but there are some flat sections. What are you going to do?
Yeah. Oh, gosh. If it were me personally, number one, e-bike. Hands down.
You can't do that.
The bigger the motor, the better.
How many batteries would you have to carry?
Like a trailer with the batteries on it. Gosh, that's one of the most interesting things we're doing right now, and a lot of it's coming from some of the stuff we're doing with Dylan. We've really put sort of a quantity on the aero of tire width. We went in with these Pirelli tires where we had the identical tire in multiple 5 millimeter width increments. And we were able to quantify that at, hey, the kind of average unbound speed, it's somewhere on the order of like 1.5 or 2 watts per 5 millimeters of width gain. But then we go into the field and we can quantify the rolling improvements on those rough surfaces of those width gains. And we find that it's clearly in favor of the wider tire. So, I think I would be looking for the absolute lowest rolling resistance. And you can look at bicyclerolling-resistance.com, has a great listing of tests that they've done. But at these speeds, rolling resistance is going to be incredibly dominant. So I would go with a pretty darn wide tire that has the lowest possible rolling resistance and then run it at, an optimal pressure. And I would probably even take the time to do some virtual elevation chung testing to make sure that is the optimal pressure, for me for that surface. And that, it's a few hours of work, but it can tell you a lot. And over the course of an event like this, small changes in rolling resistance can be, it'll be half an hour at Leadville. So I think absolutely worth your time. I would, wear the aero socks, get the fitted clothing. I would definitely run a semi-aero, one of the modern kind of, not crazy, but aero road helmets instead of, something else. I think, that TOGS thing with the hand position, I would run a narrow bar. We've certainly learned with the testing that we've done that, the aero equipment and bike helps, but it's actually really quite small because the tires are so dominating the drag. And then looking at things like, it's good. The tires are kind of messing up the airflow so much on the bike that the water bottles don't really matter, right? And so we kind of learned big bottles are almost no different than little bottles because it's so much turbulence and junk down there. And then I would really look at optimizing.
What chain ring would you run?
What chain ring? Oh God, is that like a gearing question? Because I have no idea.
Between 28 and 34.
Oh, I'd run the biggest chain ring I could find, and then I would run the biggest cassette that I could find to go with that. I mean, you guys know how much I hate the 9 and the 10 and the 11 tooth cog. I don't know if anybody makes a 1244 or whatever mountain bike gearing cassette. That's another thing. Not working extensively in that world. I always just look in there and go like, my God, it's like a time trial chain ring on the rear cassette. It's not a 56. So I don't know what your options are really there. But yeah, I mean, we know about every 3 teeth. Well, when you're in the road world, so if I'm talking like in the 40s and 50s of chain rings, every 3 teeth or so is worth a little over a watt of savings. And in the back, when you get to the small ones, I mean, like, from a 11 to a 10 is like almost 3 watts. From a 12 to a 10 is like 2, and then they start to get closer to like 1 watt increments as you go up. So, if I had my dream setup, it would be some relatively big front ring and, a cassette in the back that started with like a 13 or a 14. Because that's where you start to at least flatten the curve a little bit of those losses. And then the other one that's hard, and again, I off-road is really not my world, but you guys know I'm also not a fan of the 1x so much. And I think, the couple issues there are you're stuck with the big jumps in the cassette that you've got, but also, especially if you have a lot of climbing, you're doing a lot of pretty extreme cross-chaining. And we know that, just the cross-chaining effect of that kind of that lateral articulation of the chain can be as much as like a 6 or 7 watt penalty in a relatively low friction drivetrain, right? So by the end of your event, when the drivetrain's dirty and you're towards the end of the lubricant life, it's I don't know what it's going to be, but it's going to be more than 6 or 7 watts. And so, you might be, you got a big climb at the end of that, a race like that. I mean, you might have a 10 watt cross chaining penalty and that might only be a 5 or 6 watt penalty if you had a second smaller chain ring and you could run in that same cassette. You're going to lose a watt or 2 for the smaller chain ring, but you're going to gain it back likely and then some with that reduced lateral chain articulation. So that's probably how I would run it.
Geez, Audie, it's time to bring back the 2x.
At least for this race. Yeah, I tend to agree. It's not a popular opinion to say I'd run 2x, but I've said it on the show before, and I've heard other people go, yeah, Leadville might still be a 2x race, believe it or not, but the mountain bike world has gone firmly 1x, so it's a little hard to break that chain right now. No pun intended. So Josh, I guess the message here is when you can, get low, stay narrow, pedal fast, even if you're a 10 or 11 or 12 hour rider. I mean, that is the message here overall. For sure. And on top of that, I think just be aware of the wind, and even if you're not doing it the rest of the time, when you're in the headwind, I would double down, triple down on your aero, because that's when it really matters. If you're slacking off and not paying attention in the tailwind section, not a big deal, but it really adds up in those headwind sections. Free speed. We'll take free speed. All right, Josh, thanks so much for being on the Leadville show, a mountain bike show. I know it's not your world, but thanks for being here.
Hey, thanks so much.
Thanks again to Josh Portner, CEO of Silka. We saw Josh in Leadville last year, had him up on stage at our podcast at the expo. We're excited to see him again this year. Like Josh said, aero matters, and much of that comes down to the jersey you wear. Heidi and I have told you many, many times that the DNA Race Day jersey is exactly the kind of top that will keep you looking good and help you cheat the wind.
DNA's Race Day is the one you see Fatty and I wearing, the one we used when we mapped out our custom podcast kits. I love that bright yellow one we did originally. Even though I don't need to be aero while standing around waiting for Fatty at Twin Lakes Alternate, it's the one I wear in the feed zone.
Yeah, and while wearing a skin-tight top, it's not something I do on a day-to-day basis. It is what I will wear to shave time at Leadville. And that is what the DNA Race Day jersey can do. The Race Day jersey stays close to the skin, but thanks to its easy stretching fabric, it is comfortable to wear.
And you don't have to do a custom order to get a Race Day jersey. Just go to the DNA store, pick one out in the color you like, and you can cheat the wind like Fatty on Race Day. Check out the Race Day jersey at dnacycling.com to learn more. Okay, more on being aero at Leadville. We heard from Josh on the principles of cheating the wind, even at lower speeds. Now for someone who has taken that knowledge into the dirt, in the field. Lifetime Grand Prix competitor and three-time National Ultra Endurance mountain bike champ Dylan Johnson has been a terrific help to us this season on pacing and altitude. And now he tells us how we can parlay this aero knowledge into something usable at the Leadville Trail 100. All right, we're back with Dylan Johnson, and we're talking, of all things on this show, marginal gains, trying to squeak out a few seconds, if not minutes, here for our Leadville audience, our people trying to make time at Leadville. Dylan, you and Josh Portner and the Silka crew made it to the wind tunnel this season to try and see what was there for us off-road riders and for yourself. You have used some of those examples to great success. I want to congratulate you, first of all, on a fantastic spring, including, folks, Dylan found himself back in 76th place at Unbound and moved up to 17th by the end of the day. So terrific effort there. A second at BWR North Carolina. We're talking to Dylan fresh off that race. So I want to thank Dylan also for getting up early here on a Monday morning and talking to us. So Dylan, back to the wind tunnel. What were your expectations going in? What surprised you, and what disappointed you?
So going in, I felt like I had a rough idea of what was going to be more aerodynamic and what was going to be less aerodynamic. And while going to the wind tunnel would certainly be a cool experience, I didn't necessarily think that I was going to learn something that I didn't already know. And I was wrong. I mean, just as an example, you know, the fact that the hydration pack was faster, I personally didn't think that was going to be the case. Josh seemed to have a hunch that it was going to be the case. But I found that super surprising. I found the water bottles in the frame being faster surprising. I found the water bottle in the back jersey pocket being quite a bit faster surprising as well. So, you know, I mean, aerodynamics is not that intuitive. I think even Josh, you know, with all of his wind tunnel experience, learned a thing or two with that trip. On the hydration pack,
you guys were specific in using the USWE Outlander Pro, I think probably because it's shape and because you use it as well. But describe for us, you know, the positions you messed with in the wind tunnel and what it told you about wearing a hydration pack.
Yeah, so we actually tested two different packs. One was the USWE Outlander Pro, and one was, I believe it was an Osprey pack. I can't remember the exact model. But the Osprey pack was slower. And I think if you look at the two packs, it's not hard to figure out why. The Osprey pack had a lot more pockets on it, a lot more pockets in the back as well as pockets in the front. And I mean, it just makes sense that all those pockets are probably not helping with the aerodynamics, whereas the USWE pack is very bare bones. I mean, not only is it lightweight, but it's smooth on the back. It doesn't have extra pockets on the front. It fits very tightly across the chest. So if any pack is going to be aerodynamic, it's probably that one, even if they didn't necessarily design it to be aerodynamic. And so we tested that one in just an upright hoods position on my gravel bike. And it was a little bit faster, I think maybe 1.5 watts or 2 watts or something like that at 40 kilometers per hour. So then we're thinking, and then we're testing these different positions. We're testing a aero hoods position and an aero bars position and a puppy paws position and all of this. And we're thinking, man, we got to test this pack again in a different position to see if it's still faster or not. Because, if you're really trying to get aerodynamic, you're not going to be in an upright position. You're going to be in one of these lower positions. And if the pack is worse there, then you may not want to wear it. So we tested the pack in, I believe, an aero hoods position, which is, my back was pretty flat. And it was even better. I think it was 3 watts when I did that. So the theory there, for people that are scratching their heads, why is a pack faster? That doesn't seem to make any sense. I think it's just kind of making, at least for me and my body, it's kind of making my back more of an airfoil shape. And then when I got in an even more aerodynamic position, the pack kind of hugged right up behind my helmet, and the air flowing around my helmet could stay attached for a little bit longer as well.
Do you have any speculation at all about how this might play out on a mountain bike, these positions, and whether or not you can get in them?
Yeah, so mountain bikers don't think about this a whole lot, and for a lot of mountain bike races, getting in these super aerodynamic positions probably doesn't play a huge role because a lot of the race is single track. But if we're talking about a race like Leadville or a lot of ultra distance mountain bike races, there is a lot of gravel road and a lot of open double track sections, and aerodynamics can actually matter quite a bit. And for me personally at Leadville, I tried every chance I could. I tried to be in a more aerodynamic position. Whether that just meant bending my elbows a little bit more, or for this last edition of Leadville, I had aero bars on. So I was always trying to get in a more aerodynamic position, and I think that the wearing the pack, I think it's a little bit of a toss up at Leadville because the pack is heavier and there is so much climbing, so you're kind of going to have to play with those two factors there. But the positions that you get in on the Leadville course, I think the pack could absolutely help with that.
Yeah. Are you normally a hydration pack guy at Leadville?
I didn't do a hydration pack at all for last year at Leadville, but given these results that we just got from the wind tunnel, I think that what I may do is try to use the pack for the flatter sections of the course. I don't want to pack on me when I'm riding up Columbine, and I don't want to pack on me when I'm riding up Powerline. But I think for that flatter middle section of the course, I'll probably try to get a pack from the aid station there and have the pack on me.
Yeah, that's interesting. So your knowledge is already informing choices for you as you go for how else did you implement what you learned in the wind tunnel this spring for your spring races?
I think that one of the big changes to, for example, the spring races, the biggest one was Unbound. One of the big changes to Unbound was that aero bars are no longer allowed. And so that got the gears turning in my head because I've been a big aero bar user. And I was thinking, okay, what am I going to do here? And we tested a number of different positions in the wind tunnel. We tested aero bars. We tested the puppy paws position, which is kind of like the aero bars position, but without the aero bars themselves. You're just putting your elbows on the bare bar top. Tested aero hoods position, tested the drops position. So the drops position, while it is probably the most comfortable of the more aerodynamic positions, it's got the least aerodynamic benefit. I think it was only like a 12 or 13 watt improvement. Whereas aero hoods, I think that went up to 30 something watts. Puppy paws, that was probably 35 watts. And then aero bars was all the way up to 40 watts at 40 kilometers per hour. So a massive improvement for the aero bars, but I couldn't use them. So given that the puppy paws position was the next best position in the wind tunnel, I tried to make that position on my bike as comfortable as possible by putting foam on the top of my bar and then wrapping extra thick Silca bar tape over the top of that foam so that when I put my elbows on the bar, it was more comfortable. And actually, I used a longer computer mount as well so that I could grab my computer and actually have something to hold on to while I was in that puppy paws position. I don't necessarily recommend that for people, but that's what I did.
Mm-hmm. So take us to Leadville then. I mean, there's no aero bars rule there, not only for you, but the entire field. Discuss what your thoughts are early on, at least, about trying to first cheat the wind, and second, also, create alternative hand positions that keep you comfortable.
Yeah. So again, no aero bars at Leadville again for the entire field, not just the pro field. And I think I'll probably end up doing something similar. I'll probably get a little bit of foam on the top of my mountain bike handlebars, wrap some bar tape around that, and probably use that same, it's actually a Silca mount, but the length of it is such that, that computer is probably, I don't know, 4 or 5 inches out from the bar. And it's at least something to grab onto as opposed to grabbing onto nothing. I'm hesitant about recommending that to people because it's certainly not the safest position. And I would say that it probably requires some practice to be able to ride in that position. It's not something that I would just do on race day and hope for the best, just like aero bars themselves. But that's probably what I'll end up doing at Leadville.
Yeah, we've had questions directly to the show as well, Dylan, about padding the center section of bars and riding there. And we've told people to proceed with caution. We know people do it. They're interested in doing it, especially this year, now that they can't put extensions on or even bar ends on are technically not allowed. So people are looking for alternative hand positions, other ways to grab bars for comfort mostly. But I mean, there's some people out there with the aero mind, if you will, who might be looking for ways to get down, get low, pedal fast, which is a great mantra anywhere you're riding. So Dylan, you're a coach as well, and we have all levels of racers in the Leadville Trail 100. Some people trying to big buckle, some people trying to get a buckle, and some people just trying to finish. So let's talk about those groups real quick, and especially those people on the margins. I mean, this is not for everyone, obviously. I mean, some people just want to go there and have fun. They're just going to ride. And we look at, there's many ways to go fast at Leadville. The great Ricky McDonald got around that course in sub 9 hours many times, wearing a work shirt and a old helmet and 26-inch wheels and a doll on his front bars. So we know it can be done quickly, but there are other folks who are on the margins, right, who are wondering about time there. As a coach, let's first of all take the fast citizen racer. What are you going to tell the fast citizen racer to do if they're interested in this kind of marginal gain?
Yeah, I mean, it sounds crazy to be talking about this stuff at a mountain bike race, but take a look at what the roadies are doing. I mean, they're not doing it for no reason. So aero helmets, usually an aero helmet will come at the cost of cooling, and sometimes Leadville can be hot, but it is high altitude, so it's usually not a terrible day. I guess hot is all relative. Somebody coming from the south, maybe they think Leadville's cold. Somebody coming from the north, they think Leadville's hot. But I personally am almost certainly going to go with an aero helmet, and I think that can be helpful. Going with tight fitting jersey, if you can, maybe do a skin suit. Do some research into companies that have really optimized the aerodynamics of their kit. There's a lot of work going into that right now. My personal sponsor for my kit is Rule 28. They're doing so much wind tunnel testing on their kits, trying to find the fastest materials. Also, aero socks. I think a lot of people, especially mountain bikers, you just mention the two words aero and sock in the same sentence and they start rolling their eyes. But that was actually one of the biggest equipment gains we found in the wind tunnel was aero socks. And it's such a simple change. It's you literally just change your socks and all of a sudden you've got some, you're probably pulling back a couple minutes at Leadville. So, yeah, I mean, all of those changes, I would look into all of those if you're on the margins.
Right. And for the person just trying to get home, you'd say some of the same stuff. I mean, let's then talk about, body position, getting low, not always natural for a mountain biker. They're used to a more upright position. How would you coach somebody through that? Would you tell them, hey, get down, get low, be more roadie-like?
Well, it's something that you have to practice. I don't think that you can just show up on race day and say, okay, I'm going to try to be low when I haven't trained being low at all. Because you're not going to do it. You're going to be very uncomfortable already from the effort that you're putting in, and you're not going to want to give yourself more discomfort by trying to be in this low position. So it's something that you got to do in training. When you're out on your mountain bike training for Leadville, if you get to a flat section of gravel, practice being in a very low position with your elbows bent. Try to get that back as flat as possible. Some people don't realize how not low they are. So maybe if you get a riding buddy to film you while you're trying to get low and see how much lower you can get. I think there are a lot of gains to be had there, because obviously, we were talking just a minute about the kit changes that could make a difference, and those can make marginal differences, but the biggest difference that you're going to see with aerodynamics is anything that you do with your body position.
Well, Dylan, it's been a great spring. We want to thank you for coming on the Leadville podcast. I believe this is your third time around with us. You've been a great voice here of expertise and analysis, so thank you for that. And we'll look for you in your maybe a skin suit at Leadville, a bottle in your center jersey pocket, a U-Sweep pack, all of that, as we try to eke out a few more seconds at Leadville.
Awesome. Appreciate it.
Again, thanks to Dylan Johnson. Remember, check out Dylan's YouTube channel for more deep dives on how to go faster. Dylan is also on Instagram if you want to stay up with his racing, and he is off to a great season. So he's worth a follow.
There are 2 great blog posts on the Silka website that discuss further what you've heard about on this show, and they are definitely worth a read if you're aero curious at all. Silka.cc is the site. For now, let's wrap this episode. Fatty and I are on social media as well, most notably Instagram for me, where I'm at Michael Houghton.
And I'm Fat Cyclist. That's 2 words, Fat and Cyclist, first and last names. On Strava, you can also find me at leadville.fm/Strava. Please give me a follow.
You'll find both Fatty and me on that Facebook Leadville 100 mountain bike participants page. And if you want to have a conversation, join our Slack channel. You'll find a link to it over at leadville.fm/Slack.
If you like this show, please go wherever you listen and give us a 5-star rating. Write us a review. To see all the ways you can find this show, it's leadville.fm. Good luck in your riding, your racing, your recovery. Thanks so much for listening, and we're going to see you in just a few short weeks at the starting line.